Welcome to PHI207, Introduction to African Philosophy, Study Session 1. In the beginning, African and Europe, Introduction. In this study session, we will review the nature of the initial encounter between Africans and Europeans. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Discuss the nature of the initial encounter between Africans and Europeans. 2. Critique Eurocentrism. Early contact between Africa and Europe. Based on the information available to us from many publications on African history, we note that the earliest recorded encounters between Europeans and African kingdoms were peaceful and even friendly. The earliest recorded encounters took place in the 1400 SC, and during this time, Europeans and the Africans engaged in commerce. They even exchanged diplomatic councils. That is, the Africans and the Europeans exchanged or lent ideas about leadership from each other. What is more, they related as equals. The Europeans did not think that the Africans were unwise, savages, or anything inferior to themselves or their fellow citizens back in Europe. Indeed, these Europeans said very good things about how well things worked in some of the places they visited, such as Benin, Dahomey, and the Ashanti. They even compared the fine political organization of each of those African kingdoms with the Roman papacy. But before too long, something happened to change this cordial relationship between Africa and the West. Let us go over to the next subtitle and talk about it and its consequences. Eurocentrism. Eurocentrism, or what Abiola Irele calls European ethnocentrism, is defined as the view that Europe and everything that comes from that part of the world is the best, most important, and perhaps most desirable. In short, it means that only the Western world is entirely wholesome and human. But before we say more about this startling notion or standpoint, let us talk briefly about how or why Europeans that regarded Africans with utmost respect could possibly come to embrace Eurocentrism. The question that you may want to ask is what really happened to change Western views about Africa and indeed other civilizations. Now, let us note that the United States of America is an extension of Europe. At one point, European explorers discovered America, or what was then called the New World. Europeans discovered enormous natural resources in America, and they carted away much of this to Europe. But soon, many Europeans began settling in America, and with that, the desire to plant arable crops on the fertile American soil. With this, plantations began to sprout and develop in America. And as the plantations in the Americas developed, Afro-European demands shifted from raw materials to human labor. This means that because the Europeans needed people to work for them at their plantations in America, they decided to capture Africans and take them into slavery to work for them. Perhaps, in order to justify their ignoble act, the Europeans shifted their literacy, artistic, and philosophical characterizations of Africans. Some notable Western scholars did more than their own fair share in providing philosophical and literary reasons to justify both the enslavement of Africans and colonialism. Any such writing is usually regarded as Eurocentric or embodying European ethnocentric ideas. In the next subsection, we shall identify some of the central figures who defended Eurocentrism and discussed their central views. Some defenders of European ethnocentrism. From the foregoing in this session, we saw that European ethnocentrism or Eurocentrism is a concept used to denote any view which emphasizes that the white man or the European American is a superior human being. Here, we elaborate on this definition while drawing special attention to Eurocentric views of David Hume, Immanuel Kant, G.W.F. Hegel, and Lucien Levy-Bruhl. According to Lucius Outlaw, Eurocentrism is a cultural complex of attitudes, sentiments, customs, habits, ideas, ideals, norms, and practices that motivated, informed, and legitimated the social and cultural, economic, and political orderings of life of people. For Outlaw, Eurocentrism is a complex way of life, a way of looking at the world that encouraged the European to believe in white racial supremacy, a capitalist political economy with universalist aspirations, and a desire to dominate the globe. What Lucius Outlaw is saying is simply that Eurocentrism is the view that Europe can and should conquer and rule the rest of the world, because European culture, political, and economic system, as well as civilization, are the best ones and should be emulated by the rest of the human race. David Hume, 1711 to 1776. David Hume was a renowned Scottish philosopher. He was greatly respected in his time, and he is one of those European scholars who insisted that the black man was inferior to the white man. According to Hume, I am apt to suspect the Negroes to be naturally inferior to the whites. There scarcely ever was a civilized nation of that complexion, or even any individual eminent in action or specialization. No ingenious manufacturers among them, nor arts, nor sciences. On the other hand, the most rude and barbarous of the whites, such as the ancient Germans, the present Tatars, have still something eminent about them. Such a uniform and constant difference could not happen if nature had not made original distinction betwixt these breeds of men. What Hume is simply saying is that the Africans are very different from Europeans. While Europeans represented the proper humanity, Africans were inferior or subhumans. And what is worst, Africans have always been inferior, and in the opinion of Hume, will continue to be so. To cap it all, this great difference between the whites and the blacks was natural. Of course, you can easily see that the above claims, to say the least, outrageous and totally untrue. But they were accepted by almost everybody back then in Europe, and further propagated by other highly revered scholars in the West. Immanuel Kant, 1724 to 1804. Immanuel Kant is regarded as the greatest modern philosopher. Yet, he is one of those who simply accepted the views expressed by Hume above. Not only that, he contributed more to Hume's terrible account about the black race. According to Kant, the white race is the standard race, the superior race, with which the importance or otherwise of other races are to be measured. In Kant's view, the black race counted for only sheer stupidity. In an infamous passage, Kant was cited as making the following shocking statement: "This man was black from head to toe, a clear proof that what he said was stupid. Now you will agree with me that this was a shocking comment to be made by a highly intelligent philosopher. But again, he was listened to by the whites. G.F.W. Hegel, 1770 to 1831. Hegel, like Kant, was a German philosopher. Perhaps it could be said that he did more than the aforementioned philosophers in providing the philosophical basis for the abuse of the peoples of other cultures, especially Africans in the 19th century. His writings also provided the immediate tonic for European expansion and colonial adventure. According to Hegel, for any society or civilization to be regarded as important, then it must be part of world history or governed by reason. Now, in Hegel's incorrect view, European civilization is the only one that was fully part of world history, and it is governed by reason. For Hegel, Africa, in particular, has no history, and its peoples cannot think reasonably, have no laws, religion, or political order. And for this reason, Africans deserved to become slaves to the Europeans and also to be colonized. As a matter of fact, Hegel states that it will be better for Africa to be colonized. It was in the interest of Africans to be colonized by Europe so that Africans will learn moral education, imbibe human culture and morals. Only when this is completed will Africans then become members of world history and universal reason. Now, Hegel said all these things for selfish reasons. He wanted Africans to be forced to work for his own people. This is because capitalism, as practiced in Europe, then made many ordinary citizens to be very poor, and there was a need for people from other countries to work and enrich all those hungry Europeans. It is therefore important that all of us should work hard to make our country and continent great in our time. Some of us are still rushing to Europe and America to work for peanuts. By so doing, we indirectly continue to fulfill Hegel's wish by improving European American economies at the detriment of ours back home. Lucien Levy-Bruhl. Lucien Levy-Bruhl was a 20th century European anthropologist. He is remembered here because he carried further what the earlier philosophers had stated. Levy-Bruhl insisted that Africans possess a prelogical mentality as radically different from the highly developed mindset of the European. For Levy-Bruhl, Africans simply cannot think in abstract terms or understand how time and larger things in the universe operate. From the foregoing, we could state that Levy-Bruhl's work further provided the classical framework upon which the European colonialists related with Africans. Study session summary. In this study session, we discussed various issues about the initial encounter of Africans and Europeans. We also appraised issues relating to Eurocentrism. End of study session 1. Thank you.